She thought it was just a simple act of kindness, but she never imagined it would uncover a secret that would change everything. What would you do if the homeless person you helped turned out to be someone you should have never overlooked? We've all heard stories of kindness transforming lives, but this one stands apart. Maria, a humble waitress, worked tirelessly to make ends meet. One day, a homeless man wandered into the restaurant. He was barefoot, disheveled, and completely ignored by everyone around him, except Maria. She noticed something in him that no one else did. What happened next was beyond anything she could have expected. The truth he revealed left her utterly speechless. Before diving into this captivating story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and I'll leave a heart on your comment. Now, let's get started. Maria lived a life overshadowed by the chaos of the bustling city, a place where everyone seemed to be rushing, too busy to notice the small, invisible pieces that completed the bigger picture. For Maria, one of those invisible pieces was herself. Her evening shift at the diner began at 4 p.m., and like every day, she prepared herself for another long night of serving strangers. Maria's shift stretched until midnight, when she could finally catch the last bus home and glimpse the sleepy face of her 6-year-old son, Lucas. Being a single mother wasn't part of Maria's plan, but life rarely follows a script. With Lucas's father out of the picture and a growing pile of bills on the kitchen table, Maria lived in survival mode. Her days followed a monotonous routine. The restaurant tables were packed with hurried customers who barely acknowledged her presence. Sporadic tips, added to her meager salary, barely covered the rent. Despite it all, Maria never let herself show weakness. "I can get through another day," she repeated like a mantra, willing herself to endure. But that night felt especially heavy. The restaurant was slow, which meant fewer tips, and likely a disapproving glance from her manager. To make matters worse, Lucas had a fever, and Maria would have to buy medicine she couldn't afford. Yet she swallowed her tears and forced a smile, even as exhaustion, both physical and emotional, threatened to overwhelm her. It was in this fragile moment that he appeared. The soft chime of the doorbell announced his entrance, but what followed was a jarring silence. The man, clearly homeless, seemed to defy an unspoken rule of the space. Torn clothes clung to his frail frame, and his bare feet carried a layer of dust accumulated over countless days. His skin told stories of countless nights spent under the open sky. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath as all eyes turned to him, not with curiosity, but with judgment. The man avoided eye contact, keeping his head low as he shuffled to an empty corner. It was as if he wanted to disappear, yet desperately needed something. Maria noticed the stares from the customers, their eyes filled with contempt, and the whispered remarks from her coworkers, who made no effort to conceal their disdain. "Look at that, a beggar. He's going to scare off the customers. Why do they even let people like that in?" Their words cut through the air like a dagger, and Maria felt a sharp pang in her chest. She knew it wasn't easy to be in his position, treated as if you didn't exist. She understood that feeling all too well. Though not homeless, she'd been overlooked many times in her life, not because of where she was, but because of who she was. A waitress, a single mother, an ordinary woman struggling to stay afloat. With a deep sigh, Maria grabbed her notepad and made her way toward him. The whispers grew louder, but she didn't falter. "Good evening," she said gently. "Can I help you?" The man looked up slowly, his eyes meeting hers, and it felt like a punch to the chest. His gaze held shame, layered with a deep, raw pain that was impossible to hide. He murmured, almost inaudibly, "I just wanted a glass of water." The phrase echoed in Maria's mind. A simple request, something so basic, yet it seemed to be all he could muster the courage to ask for. Maria glanced around at the judgmental faces of the customers and the sarcastic smiles of her coworkers. A wave of indignation washed over her. "I'll get you something to eat," she replied firmly before he could object. As she prepared a plate, her colleagues didn't miss a chance to criticize. "He's not even going to pay. You're wasting your time, Maria." But Maria didn't care. In fact, as she filled the plate with what little she could offer, hot soup, fresh bread, and a piece of leftover cake, something shifted inside her. She knew she couldn't solve all the world's problems, But at that moment, she could give this man something he hadn't received in a long time: dignity. When she placed the plate in front of him, the man froze for a moment, staring at the food as if he couldn't believe it was real. His watery eyes lifted to meet hers. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria answered sincerely, "Because everyone deserves to be treated with respect." He ate slowly, each bite seeming to carry the weight of holding back tears. Maria returned to her work, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. When he finished, the man stood up, carefully adjusted his chair, and said, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." Then, just as quietly as he had entered, he left. Little did Maria know, this small act of kindness would be the start of something far greater than she could have imagined. Over the following days, Maria couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. The image of the man, so grateful for something so simple, lingered in her mind during every quiet moment. She couldn't help but wonder, who was he? How had his life brought him to this point? She couldn't shake the questions swirling in her mind. How had his life led him to such a desperate situation? And above all, why did his words, "You have no idea how much this means to me," carry so much weight? It wasn't the first time Maria had helped someone, but something about this moment felt different. As she went about her routine at the restaurant, she realized the day had left its mark on others too. Her colleagues, who had once openly mocked her, now whispered behind her back. One of the cooks couldn't resist a sarcastic jab. "Our heroine, helping the poor," he said with a mocking grin. "Just don't forget, this isn't a charity shelter." The manager was no better. With a sly smile, he remarked, "Maybe think twice before serving free banquets next time, Maria." Maria didn't respond, not because she agreed, but because she knew arguing with people who didn't understand was futile. Still, their words lingered, leaving her uneasy. Had she done something wrong? Was her act of kindness pointless? But that night, when Maria returned home and saw Lucas sleeping peacefully, the doubt within her began to fade. Something deep inside her stirred, a quiet assurance that what she had done mattered. It didn't matter what anyone thought. Maria had done what she believed was right. When she looked at her son, she wondered what she would do if he were ever in the same situation. The answer was clear. She would do everything in her power to help him. That realization solidified something in Maria. If the experience had taught her anything, it was that the world needed more empathy, not less. For a few days, life carried on as usual. But fate wasn't finished with Maria's story. About a week later, Maria was cleaning a table by the window when the doorbell rang. She glanced up instinctively and felt her heart skip a beat. It was him. The same man. His clothes, though still worn, were now clean, and his hair and beard had been trimmed. He looked different, but the look in his eyes remained the same, a mix of shame and determination. He approached hesitantly, as if unsure of his welcome. Maria noticed the familiar, suspicious glances from the customers, but this time she didn't hesitate. "Hi, nice to see you again," she said warmly. "Would you like to sit down?" He shook his head. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you for just a minute." Curious, Maria signaled for a colleague to cover her section and followed him to the door. In his hands, he held a battered envelope, and he seemed to be struggling to find the right words. "Finally," he spoke, "I needed to meet you again. I couldn't stop thinking about what you did for me. You didn't just give me food that day. You gave me something I'd lost a long time ago. Hope." Maria stood silent, caught off guard by the sincerity and intensity of his words. The man continued, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I had no one. I'd been living on the streets for months, not knowing where to go or what to do. But after what you did, I decided I had to try. I found a place to shower and sleep for a night. The next day I went to a shelter. They helped me get a temporary job. It's not much, but it's a start. And all of this happened because you looked at me as a person, not a problem." Maria felt her eyes well up with tears. She had always believed that a small act of kindness could make a difference. But hearing it directly from someone whose life had been so profoundly affected was overwhelming. Still, she couldn't help but ask, "But why me? What did I do that made such a difference?" The man took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and handed her a battered envelope. Inside was an old photo, worn at the edges but clearly cherished. It showed a woman holding a small child. He pointed to the photo, his voice trembling. "That's my mother. When she was still alive, she used to say that kindness should never be underestimated. That day, you reminded me of her. It wasn't just the food you gave me. It was a reminder of who I was, of who I could still be." Maria looked at the photo, her throat tightening with emotion. Behind the man's worn appearance was a life, a story she could scarcely imagine. He met her gaze, his eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know how I'm going to repay you for this," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I promise I'll try." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maria holding the envelope, her heart brimming with a mix of emotions she couldn't put into words. She stood there, realizing that this was no ordinary moment. Something deep inside her told her this encounter was far from over. Days passed, and Maria returned to her routine, but something had shifted. Her work no longer felt the same. Every customer became an opportunity, a chance for connection, a reminder that everyone carries invisible burdens, some too heavy to bear alone. Yet she couldn't fully move on. The mysterious man lingered in her thoughts. Who was he, really? What was his full story? And why did every word he spoke feel so weighty, so full of meaning? Then, one gray morning, Maria walked into the restaurant to an unusual scene. A commotion was unfolding near the entrance. The manager was in a heated argument with someone. "Decisions and a series of unfortunate events, I lost everything." Enrique's voice trembled slightly as he continued. "When I ended up on the streets, I thought I'd never recover. That day, when you treated me with dignity, it reminded me of who I used to be and gave me the strength to start over." Maria sat frozen, staring at the document in disbelief. "But this," she stammered, "this can't be real." Enrique smiled faintly, his eyes glimmering with emotion. "It is real. The property isn't much, a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It's what's left of everything I once had. I've been working to get my life back together, and I want you to have it." The well-dressed woman, who had remained silent until now, spoke gently. "I'm a lawyer, and I've helped Enrique prepare everything. This isn't charity, it's gratitude. He insisted on doing this because he believes you deserve it." Maria's hands trembled as she held the letter. Her thoughts raced. How could this be happening? She felt overwhelmed, torn between disbelief and gratitude. "I don't know if I can accept this," she finally whispered. Enrique shook his head firmly. "You don't know what you've done for me. That day you didn't just feed me, you restored my faith in humanity. This is my way of saying thank you. Please let me do this." Tears streamed down Maria's face as she tried to find the right words. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just treated you the way everyone deserves to be treated." "That," Enrique said softly, "is exactly why you deserve this." The moment was charged with emotion as Maria looked at Enrique and then at the lawyer, still struggling to process what was happening. She finally nodded, her voice shaky but resolute. "Thank you. I don't know what to say, but thank you." As Enrique and the lawyer left, Maria sat for a while, clutching the document. The weight of the moment settled over her, a profound reminder of how one small act of kindness could ripple outward in unimaginable ways. And so, Maria's life took a turn she could never have predicted. The small house became a place of warmth and hope, not just for her and Lucas, but for others in need. Maria vowed to carry forward the same kindness that had changed her life, knowing that even the simplest gestures could create miracles. Decisions and some personal tragedies, I lost everything. I was consumed by debt and ended up on the streets for months. I lived like a ghost, without direction, without hope, until you, with a simple gesture, reminded me of who I really was. Maria was stunned. Enrique continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "After the day you helped me, I sought support, found a job, and regained some of my dignity. But most importantly, I found people who believed in me. This woman here is my advocate, and I've decided that I want to repay you for what you've done. This property, though small, is in my name. I want it to be yours, for you and your son's future." Maria's breath caught in her throat, and she couldn't hold back her tears. It felt surreal. How could someone she barely knew offer her something so great? She tried to refuse, saying she didn't need anything. But Enrique was firm. "It's not about what you need," he said gently. "It's about what you deserve. I'm only here today because you reminded me that there is still good in the world. Please accept it." At that moment, the restaurant seemed to fall silent. Her colleagues watched from afar, curiosity written on their faces. Even the manager, peering out from the kitchen, seemed surprised. Maria didn't know what to say, but in that instant, she realized it wasn't just about accepting a gift. It was about continuing the cycle of kindness that had begun with a simple plate of food. She finally reached for the papers with trembling hands and looked up at Enrique, who now wore a calm, sincere smile. And then it hit her. Sometimes, small gestures have the power to change lives, to create a ripple effect that spreads far beyond what anyone could ever imagine. Transform not just one life, but many. And in the end, the true wealth lies in the impact we leave on people's hearts. In the days that followed, Maria reflected deeply on everything that had happened. Enrique's gesture, as transformative as it was, wasn't just about retribution. It symbolized something greater. She realized that her life hadn't changed merely because of the property, but because of the meaning behind that moment. The kindness she had shown without expecting anything in return had sparked a chain reaction that transformed both Enrique's life and hers. Over time, Maria used Enrique's gift to open a small cafe, a place where people from all walks of life were welcomed with warmth and dignity. At the entrance, a discreet picture displayed the phrase, "True wealth is in giving, not in receiving." This cafe became a refuge for many, and Maria made it a point to share her story with those who came seeking rest or connection. Enrique remained a constant presence, visiting the cafe and even helping Maria with some important decisions. The two forged an unbreakable bond, a friendship that symbolized how humanity can come together even in the darkest of times. For Maria, that episode wasn't just a milestone in her life, but an eternal reminder that simple gestures have the power to transform the world. And so, Maria went on to live with a greater purpose, inspiring others to believe that even when all seems lost, an act of kindness can be the spark to start again. Want to see more touching stories like this? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. And for those of you who enjoy a good story and watch until the end, leave your comment. I stayed until the end. Remember, the most valuable lessons come from the most difficult moments. See you in the next video.